Pastor Lane, will you just open with a short prayer, please?
Sure. Yeah, we thank you for our time together today and just the fellowship that we can enjoy. And now as we hear how your grace has showered upon this family and just the journey that you brought them through, we just want to glorify you and just receive encouragement and so draw us closer to you and to one another. In Jesus' name,
Amen. Well, Mavis and I grew up in South Africa. Obviously, we were born shortly after the war, so mostly we grew up in the 50s and 60s. In the 50s and 60s, South Africa was a peaceful place, progressive country, and doing very well, based on the free market system, the same as here in America. Yes, we had apartheid, which in English is called separate development, and you had it here until about 1967. Anyway, as I said, what it really meant was that everybody more or less was free to live their lives the way that they wanted. You know, the Jews had their synagogues, the Catholics, the churches, the Chinese had their temples, the Muslims had their mosques, and so on and so forth. And quite a number of them had their own schools. And everybody was pretty well happy. When I was a little fellow, I suppose late 50s, I think, my mother, who grew up pretty close to the tribal trust lands and knew a lot of people, would take us, make arrangements and would take us into the tribal trust lands for our holiday, usually about 3 weeks. And I had an absolutely wonderful time. We were guests of the local chief, and not a soul would touch us, little boy. So I could run and do exactly as I pleased. And my mom would take along a little black fellow who was slightly older than me, supposedly to look after me. Well, the two of us would get up to all manner of tricks. And my mother sometimes would lather us, him too, both of us got it, equally. And that was the days when there was peace. Outside influences began to set in and the fires of dissatisfaction, and soon the terrorist planting and all the rest of it started in the late 60s. And then they started to blow up things and blow up hotels and blow up trains and blow up things and kill people and murder people. And by the way, it wasn't all aimed at the whites. A lot of it was aimed at the blacks themselves. Because what happens is these people that wanted to change the whole show would send young people, would go up to Russia, and there they would be trained in all the terrorist activities, and then they would come back and they would spread all of this. And any of the blacks who didn't go along with what they wanted would be just dragged out of their houses and beaten near to death. And then they'd throw a tire over their head and put gasoline on and burn the brains out. They called that necklacing. Mandela's wife was great on that. Anyway, in about 92, I realized, wait, it's time to change. The winds of change are getting strong, and I thought it's time to leave. But Mavis wasn't interested, and my kids weren't interested because we had a good life. And in 93, I brought Mavis to America. I had to come here for about 6 weeks. I was looking after the interests of about 15 American companies at that time, and I needed to see to a whole lot of business here. So I said to Mavis, well, why don't you come along, Come and have a look at the place. So Mavis came, and the first 2 weeks wasn't so good, and then after that the penny dropped. Boy, that America was the best place, it's like that. And then the shopping started. And I just left it. And eventually I said to him, man, girl, you better stop this. We would never get this stuff on the plane. Anyway, we got home, and Mavis was, and in 98 I brought Bruce, my youngest boy, and he met a girl here and so on, and he's never been home since, and he has a wonderful life. So, but I started to let it be known amongst one of my companies that I was looking after in the rubber industry that I wanted out. I had a Chinese lady in Cleveland. Margaret Wong was her name. She's a well-known lawyer. She was trying to work my system out for me. And anyway, I got a phone call from one of these companies that said, yeah, okay, we'll help you, but would you go to Romania for us? We have a 1,000-man operation over there, and we're having trouble over there, and we know you know the product and everything. Will you go over there, and will you just see that nothing leaves a place that shouldn't be, because we've just had a disaster in sending stuff to England, and it turned out not good. So they said, well, you stay there for about 18 months, and then we'll bring you over to the States. I said, yeah, sure. I thought, well, yeah, I can pay for my ride. You know, I give them what they want, they'll give me what I want. And Mavis and I landed up in Romania. Not so good in the beginning. People had just come out of socialism, just come out of communism. And of course, South Africa was going into it. And the older people, which obviously couldn't speak English, they could maybe speak Russian, but anyway, they were dead scared of foreigners. They wouldn't talk to you. You were like the plague, you see, because under the communist system, if a foreigner approached you, even he said, what's the time, which way to go, anything you like, you know. They had 24 hours to go to a police station and make a full statement in that regard. And when we stayed there, we would sometimes get a knock on the door, and it would be a guy in a black jacket or whatever, and he would maybe ask in Romanian, and he'd say, does Domnul, it's Mr. Popescu stay here? But he had a clipboard and he was looking, you knew he was looking at your photograph to see whether you were this person that's supposed to be staying in this place. And you would say, no, he doesn't stay here. And they'd say, thank you very much, and they'd go away. But you knew they were checking on you. And I remember one night, 3 hours later, I get another different fellow. Knocks on the door, I suppose, you know. He didn't realize his buddy had been 3 days before. So, he knocked on the door, and he opens up, and before I spot him, before he could say anything, I said, man, you're one of your buddy in English. I said, one of your buddies been here 3 days ago. He sorted me. Oh, thank you, he says, turned around and walked off. So, after about 7 months, we got a car, and then life started to get much better. And one day I brought a pamphlet home in the English language. Now, I hadn't read it. And I just gave it to Mavis. I thought, well, something to read. When I came home that night, my goodness, she had found that there was a missionary Baptist church there. One of the Southern Baptist mission board people. And Mavis had made contact with them. The minister had come around, got it all sorted out. And they took us to church on the Sunday, and we became part of that mission church for our whole stay while we were there, but especially while we stayed in Bucharest. What was his name? He was a Bauer. Bill and his wife? Carol, that's right. They were the missionaries. What they did, they were usually come for about 3 years. The board would send them in for 3 years, and then obviously would pull them out, and if necessary, send a new pastor in. Anyway, after a period of time, a little bird told me, he said, man, you better watch your back. These people that you think are going to take you to America are not going to do it. I said, no, they won't do that. This is a good company, honorable people. He said, I'm just telling you, watch your back. And so it turned out that, yes, sure, they were going to leave me stranded. The reason being that they'd had all sorts of strikes in America. They'd reduced 50% of their staff, and they thought if they brought in a foreigner, the whole place was going to explode.
It was 9/11. 9/11.
Yes, or whatever. So anyway, 9/11. 9/11 happened and we were there. And there was very small, but there were Muslims in Romania, but not very many. But they were out in the street. They went to one of these big turnaround, very prominent place in town. And they were hollering and they were hooting and they had their signs and they were jumping and jiving. They were so pleased that Bin Laden poke America in the eye, you see. But what they didn't know is they weren't dealing with ordinary people, they were dealing with Romanians. And Romanians don't take lightly to anybody messing around in their backyard. Took the police about half an hour to get organised and get there with all their vans. They loaded up all the people. Those people never slept in Romania that night. They don't worry about the courts, they don't worry about anything. They bundled them up, took them to the airport, and they were gone. People were saying, what about my family? So we'll phone them from Egypt. They were out the same night, they were all gone. After that, the Muslims were very quiet and orderly, and life carried on. So I was fortunate to get headhunted by another outfit, and I ended up at a company called Sanex. They made floor and wall tiles, and they made sanitary ware, commodes and stuff like that. They were Romania's largest. They'd gone bankrupt. A group of investors had taken them over. I was part of the management group to turn the company around, get it up going. Once it was going and up properly, the idea was to sell. So we landed up in the capital of Transylvania. Well, I never saw Dracula. They sent him down to Afghanistan to help the Americans over there, so I didn't actually see him. So we made many. Once they knew, we decided, quite rightly I think, we're living in Romania, we'd better learn the Romanian language. Most people come there don't. And they want those people to speak English to them. Well, they don't speak English really, except the young people. The young people would learn English. If it's an older person, forget it, he won't speak. He speaks Russian. And we got a tutor twice a week, and we started to learn the language. It was like switching on a light. Once they knew that we were making a determined effort to fit in with them, it was like night and day. Suddenly they weren't so withdrawn, suddenly they weren't shying away from us, suddenly they were helpful and friendly, and life changed dramatically for us. And we made many good friends there. And I'm sure, while we were in Bucharest, and we were in the, International Baptist Church, it was IBC, International Baptist Church, the pastor's wife took Mavis to an organization. She was a member. It was called the IBC, the International IWA, International Women's Association of Romania. And I'm going to let Mavis tell you about her activities in Romania, but I will say that she started out, and in 1 year she went from 0 to hero, and in 1 year she was the president of the whole place. So I'm going to let Mavis tell you that, and then I'll get back on.
Well, it is said that from the time of conception your brain starts working, but at times like this, mine seems to want to come to a standstill. But we'll get back to the matter at hand. We'll talk about IWA. IWA was a non-religious, non-political organization, and our main function was to get the international ladies together, which included the Romanian ladies, and it involved the 85 embassies, plus the United Nations, who had a refugee camp in Bucharest. My function was to organize all kinds of functions to raise funds to improve the hospitals and the orphanages in Romania and areas surrounding Bucharest, as far afield as 50 miles around Bucharest. This is not always an easy task, because getting 85 nationalities together, trying to organize something when each has his own idea, always creates some problems. But mostly, the ladies were wonderful. The orphanages in Romania were in a terrible condition. a lot of the children in the orphanages had parents who were alive, but sadly they could not afford to feed their children, so the only option was to put them into the state orphanages, and sadly there was very poor supervision, so we had cases of children producing more children for the orphanage. The conditions of the orphanages were absolutely appalling. So we decided to go in, inspect the orphanages and see which we were going to help. We would put heating in, we would paint the place. We did not buy food because we knew that food would not be in the orphanage kitchen, but it would go home to somebody else's kitchen. Once we had painted the place, put new windows in, and done everything necessary to make the place extremely comfortable for the children, we'd have people from the government walking in and saying, you know, we need this building now. We'll have to put the children somewhere else. Be back to the same thing. But every dark cloud has a silver lining. And we found private orphanages being run by missionaries from America, South Africa, and other places. And we started investing in these orphanages. And many of the children, once they turn 18, are turned out onto the streets, and they end up in prostitution in Greece and in Arab countries. So what the Christian missionaries who were running the orphanages would do is set up programs to educate these young girls and boys. And the girls mostly went into hairdressing and nursing. And we knew at least there would be a future for these children. I won't elaborate too much on that, and I'll get to the hospitals. It would frighten you to go into a hospital in Bucharest. There were no curtains on the windows. There were no screens between the beds. Men and women were mixed in the wards. Everything was done exposed to public view. And it seemed as if these people had been so hardened to these conditions, it just didn't bother them anymore. One of the embassies, I think it was the German embassy, said that they would assist us to bring 100 mattresses into one of these hospitals. When the mattresses arrived, we put the Iowa tag on so that we could recognize them, because we knew we would have to go into the hospital to see whether the mattresses were on the beds. Well, when we arrived there, no new mattresses on the beds. Well, where are the mattresses? They are in storage. Well, we'd like to see them, please. There were 4 mattresses. 96 had disappeared. And we knew they'd gone into somebody's home or they had been stolen. So we realized that the only thing you could do and give to these hospitals were things you could screw down to the floor and then nobody could pick up and carry away. There was a German doctor, he was a pediatrician, and he had purchased, with the help of money from Germany, a building that he had converted into a children's hospital. He invited me to visit his hospital, and I was thrilled at what I'd seen there. Every ward had 4 new beds, new mattresses, new linen, new blankets, and he had artists come in and paint murals depicting children's nursery rhymes on the walls. In the center of the room, he'd have a table with a chair for each child. He had games, snakes and ladders, he had blocks, and the children could amuse themselves when they were awake. Outside in the garden, he had swings and merry-go-rounds, teeter-totters, anything that could amuse the children, because he firmly believed that children needed fresh air. And if they were well enough, they did not need to be inside. They had to get out and play. And of course, the weather is absolutely beautiful in Romania. So the children were quite happy to be in these hospitals, and I can assure you they weren't that keen to go home, to be well and go home. During the year that I was the president, I managed to raise $155,000. I organized a big bazaar in the Marriott Hotel that had just been built.
Best in town at the time.
Yeah, it had just been built, and it was run by an American fellow. And I said to him, how about giving us the opportunity to advertise your hotel and give us a venue that is large enough for 85 embassies to display something from their country that the people could purchase. Well, by the grace of God, it was a wonderful success. And then 3 months later, that was in December, in the March of the next year, I organized a big spring ball, and I invited people from the dancing studio to open the ball with Viennese waltzes, and this went down exceptionally well. It was at that time that Malcolm had moved up to Transylvania, and I had to tender my resignation and moved to Transylvania. But that particular year, I was extremely busy and extremely excited about what I was doing. And anyway, it seemed that the Lord called us to Cluj. We had other functions for us. Thank you.
And I must tell you something. Now, I haven't seen this. I don't know how these people thought about this, but here's a good one. Mavis gets this ball going. And it's a raving success as usual. But during the evening, a woman with a clipboard comes around. Now she's, they're trying to raise money. And here was the story. You've got to put down what you think your wife is worth. And the one who puts down the most, his wife will be queen of the ball. You don't have to be pretty, you just had to have the cash. So of course this came around, and I thought, whoa, my wife's the president. I can't do something here. And I didn't have too much money with me. Anyhow, I slipped out and I went home, and I got a couple of $100, I don't know how many $100. So I came back, and a little bird had sort of told me, well, it's going like in this direction. And I put down a whole lot of money. I thought, well, nobody's going to beat that. And sure enough, my bid was the highest. So Mavis, being the president, gets up on the podium, and now somebody who'd done this now hands her an envelope, you see. The second princess is Mrs. So-and-so. Everybody claps and all right, you want to have her, and she comes up and they put the crown on. Then of course it's another envelope. And this is the first princess. Same story, everybody claps, put the little crown on their head, until Mavis gets the third one. Now this is the queen of the ball. I know what's going on, but she doesn't know what's going on. And she opens it, and I can see she's a bit confused. Here's her name here, you see. She must have thought, well, why have they got my name here? And then the penny drops. Everybody's up and shouting and hurrah, and Mavis was the queen of the ball. I feel pretty good about that.
I was a queen for a night.
She was queen for a night, that's right. Anyway, we went to, I started out by flying up on Monday morning. I suppose the distance, maybe from here to Miami or something. I would fly up on Monday morning with a couple of other people. As I said, we were a group that were to turn this company around. We'd fly up. I was looking after, I had about 5 hats in the beginning. And I would do the logistics, and I'd do the warehousing, and I'd do the engineering, and I don't know what else anymore. So, and I'd stay in a hotel during the whole week, and I'd fly back on Friday night. A car would be waiting for me there so I could have a weekend, and I had a car also in Cluj-Napoca being the capital of Transylvania. And so that carried on for a while. Then I realized, wait a minute, there's something very fishy going on in this company. And then I realized, oh, there's a racket going on here, a big racket. And there's a lot of senior people involved in this racket, people who were there before. And there was like a business in a business. They were making the tiles, and the people at the bottom there, they were using the warehouses, and then they were shifting the tiles out and they were selling them. But I could never exactly find out how to break the syndicate. And then I got and what I did is, on the weekend, I would have a full inventory. Every tile in the place in the warehouse had to be counted. But I wouldn't use my warehouse people. No, I would use people from other departments, from sales, from accounting, from engineering, from production, all. And all the people involved here in the warehouse, now they could go home and enjoy the weekend. And of course, next week I'd use a different lot of people. And this went on, week after week I did it, mercilessly. I knew this was going to crack soon, because the people that are having to spend their weekends doing this stuff not going to like this, why all the people who were involved in all this racket go home for the weekend. And then sure enough, it cracked. And they started to tell my chief engineer, and he would bring the information to me until eventually we found out who these people were. Of course, we got rid of them, and eventually we got the place. We broke that, and then in the process of that, I realized that this is not working out. So I told Mavis, oh yes, there was a bit of a earthquake or something. The tiles fell off the wall, and Mavis phoned me, man, the concrete's cracking and all sorts in the apartment. And I said, okay, and I think what we need to do is close up the apartment and fly you up here, and you come live with me up here in Cluj. So we took, they call it a villa, but it's nothing else but a double-story home, quite a nice one. And Mavis came up to Cluj with me and lived with me there. And as one of the senior managers, I got well paid. They paid everything. The only thing that I had to pay was my food. Then I insisted on paying the telephone. No, we pay the phone too. I said, no, my wife makes international calls. And that costs a lot of money, and I don't want you people coming and crying on my shoulder, Mrs. Mitchell's making too many international, because you see over there you had 2 phone systems in the communist place. They didn't want you to find out about anything else except what they could control. So you had the normal phone, which was pretty well local. Then you had an international phone. That one you could phone out. That was very select, and not many people had one. But of course I got one, and because I was a foreigner, and I got one, and that was okay. And we lived quite well. They were a very different people. 20% of them were actually Hungarian speaking, and 8% are Romanians, but they had a different mindset to the big Bucharest, which was a big, massive, like half the size of New York or something. And they were actually, we made very good friends there. I got 5 weeks holiday a year. So for 3 weeks I'd fly down to South Africa to my farm, and for the other 2 weeks I'd fly to America to visit Bruce, who was in the military. I brought him over in '98, and he met a girl, and he got married, and they still have a wonderful life together. Anyway, on one of my trips to South Africa, when I came back, my goodness, they sold the factory. I tried to, and of course all the senior management goes out with a sale, because the new people bring in their own senior management. So that was that. There was another opportunity for me to get to be the CEO of a different company, selling leather goods and all the rest of it, a 1,400-man operation. But anyway, that fell through because the people didn't have enough money to pay us, the management. And then I came to America to visit Bruce, And he said, Dad, it's about time. When are you coming? You know, I'm here, I'm an American citizen already, and you're still fiddling around out there. So I said, okay, boy, we'll come. And it took us about 7 months to, I stayed with him in Fayetteville. He was in the military. It took us about 7 months to get, we didn't get a green card straight away. They gave us a 1-year work permit. Then after the end of that 1 year, they'll give you another. But you kind of heard the gossip, and that said, well, during the course of your second 1-year work permit, your green card will arrive. And lo and behold, it did. Absolutely unceremoniously. It just came in the mail as if it was just another piece of trash mail that you received. Fortunately, Mavis opened the envelope, and lo and behold, there's a green card. And about 2 weeks later or so, the next one came. And I don't know whose came first, but Mavis and I then had our green card. How did we get to Savannah? Well, what I did was that we'd take the weekends. We were in Fayetteville, North Carolina. That's where Fort Bragg is. And we'd go away the weekend. And we'd go to a place, like we'd go to we started out at Wilmington, North Carolina. And we'd spend the weekend there, have a look around. And the next weekend we might go down to Myrtle Beach, see, have a look around. And the weekend after that we'd go down as far as Charleston and have a look around. And then we came into Savannah. And while we were looking around down the downtown, with all the trees and that, to go like that, and Mavis said, gee, this looks very much like Durban North. I like it here. So, that was it. You know, if the wife likes it, the place is good. And we stayed in one of these hotels you pay by the week. Suburban thingy down here on Abercorn. And then eventually we got a place to stay. And I said to Mavis at the time, you know, I think she'd never worked for many, many years since we got married. She was a housewife, she raised the family and so on. I said, you know, I think you should get a job. And then also we need to get into a church. If you get a job, I said, you'll meet people. That's the quickest way to get settled in a town. Meet people. So she walked into JCPenney. She walked out to the job. She met one of the managers. He said, can I help you? And she just said, well, you got a job for me? You know, including buying the stuff she wanted. And he said, what can you do? And she said, this and this. And he said, do you know anything about draperies? And she said, what do you want to know? Not at all. And he said, well, go over there and put in your application, come straight back to me, which Mavis didn't see hired. And then when she went in there, one of the ladies that she was working with, I think, or somebody else, and said, well, when you go to church?
No, that was Betty Powell.
Okay, it was a Betty Powell. There you go.
Shopping.
There you go. And Mavis said, well, are we looking for a place? And she said, well, you've got to come to our church, which is just over the road from the hall. So we came. And guess what? We're still here.
I just want to say a word or two.
Can't be left out, huh?
No. We were just married. It was long before we had television in South Africa. And in the evenings, we would listen to the radio. We'd play tic-tac-toe, fiddlesticks, anything to occupy ourselves in the evening. But one evening, he brought out the map of America. And he pointed to Jacksonville, and he pointed to Savannah, and he said, one day, we will live in one of these two places. And I said to him, have you gone completely out of your mind? Well, prophecy is true. It took years, but we are here. And we are happy to be here. We have some wonderful friends. We have a wonderful pastor. I love Mark. I'll still get to know Andrew, but I love him already. And we are extremely blessed with the people around us in the church. Thank you.
I'll just say one last thing, and that is, we all know from the events that have happened in the last while, with them breaking everything and breaking buildings and burning and looting and all the rest rest of it. Folks, we've lived it. We know what socialism is. We've been through the communist stuff. I've had guns stuck to my head. I haven't told you all these funny stories. I said to her, it'll be very watered down. But I've had the gun stuck to my head. I've had the soldiers accosting me. I've had all that. Beware, folks. The Americans are not doing anything about this. They're just kind of like letting it happen. You have no idea what can come. Cuba's had socialism for 60 years. And yes, they've got, what's it, national medical, free medical aid. But it's so bad I wouldn't let them fix a wheelbarrow. It's that bad. We have the most wonderful country on the face of the earth. Do not let anybody take it away. Ronald Reagan said, and he's right, freedom is only one generation from being taken away from you. Beware of these people, because they will book nothing but their own agenda. And if you don't agree with them, things are going to happen to you. So, build America for your grandchildren.